Love the lace. Good morning. How are you? Good morning. How are you today? Good.
Good morning.
This is Mike.
Welcome to Alex.
Oh yeah. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you. Mike's been so helpful. Where is he? There he is.
How are you doing? We got something for you here.
Yes. Hi. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Absolutely. If I could, my name is Veronica Tesler. I am so pleased to have the Congresswoman here, and I welcome all of you to my business, Yotopia. I started my business almost 8 years ago, and this is one of what I hope will be many visits by presidential candidates in the weeks and months to come. Little known fact, I lived in Hawaii for a short time when my father was working there. I grew up in a military community, and so I have a great admiration for you and your service to our country, and a great admiration for your state. So thank you for being here. Welcome to Iowa. Welcome to Iowa City. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you about your ideas for our country going forward, and congratulations on the nomination, or sorry, for congratulations on the office to lead the free world, and we're just so glad to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all so much for coming out. Again, thanks, Veronica, for opening your doors to us. I hope you all get a treat here before you leave this morning. It'll be right around lunchtime by the time we're done. I want to say where's Emma? Where's Emma?
Emma?
Emma's been very helpful. Thank you, Emma. And Nick and Samuel have been great volunteers. There you are. Are you Nick or Samuel?
I'm Samuel.
Okay. There's Nick. Hey, nice to see you.
Buy a t-shirt from Nick.
What's that?
Buy a t-shirt.
Buy a t-shirt, yes. It's great to be back in Iowa. Somehow, over the last few times that we have come here, your snow has made the travel here a little challenging. I thought, okay, in April we'll be fine. We flew from LA, layover in Chicago. Yes, was it yesterday? It was the day before. We left the day before yesterday. When we couldn't take off from LA because there was a big snowstorm in Chicago. Flight was 5 hours delayed, got to Chicago, couldn't get our bags, stayed there overnight, drove up here yesterday, picked up our bags from the airport, but we made it. We made it, and it is well worth it, and I'm so happy that the sun is out. You know, coming and being able to hang out with people like you and gatherings like this give me a lot of hope. It gives me inspiration. You know, there are so many challenges that we face. I feel like every day when I open Twitter or turn on the news or scroll the headlines, the picture that is painted is very dark because of the challenges that we face, because of the divisions that are being placed between us, because of the corruption of spirit that is happening, that's cast a dark shadow in Washington, that's made it so that so many of these challenges we are confronted with every single day are really coming from, are being driven by self-serving politicians, greedy corporations, and special interests who for too long have ruled over Washington, who for too long have been the ones who have been writing the policies that impact our lives. This is what we are gathered here to change. This is what we must change to bring about the kind of difference, that kind of positive change that will impact every one of our lives. You know, this is a reminder to us about the vision that our founders had for our country, that we will have a government of, by, and for the people. And as we are reminded of these words that I think sometimes too often we take for granted, you know, we hear them and we repeat them ever since we were kids, but when we actually look at the government that we have today, unfortunately we see that this is not what we have. This is not the government that is serving us today. Instead, we see pieces of legislation, like one that is currently being pushed in Congress, just had tax day yesterday, that would ban the IRS from offering a free tax filing service for people. Where does this come from? The name, who knows the name of the bill? Something like, it's called something like Save the Taxpayers Act.
Intuit perpetual money machine.
Well, exactly, yeah, right, that's what it should be. But the problem is, the name of the bill is something like Save the Taxpayers Act. But in that bill, this bipartisan bill that's being pushed, there is a provision that prohibits the IRS from offering a free tax filing service for taxpayers. And if you look at who is driving this, it's certainly not us. It is those corporate tax filing services who will lose money if the IRS does this. This is just one example. I read a story about it last night. One example of so many about how we are seeing these corporate interests who are driving the policies that are being made, who are paying to play, making it so that they and their lobbyists have a seat at the table, whereas we the people get left behind. But this is where we have a choice, we have an opportunity, and I would say even a responsibility. Because the only way that we change this paradigm, the only way that we retake our power to fulfill that vision that our founders had for us, is by doing what we are doing here, by being informed, getting engaged in the process, doing that tough work of organizing, turning out the votes, and making sure that the leaders that we elect are truly of, by, and for the people, and who are solely focused on fulfilling that mission of putting service above self, of putting the interests and the well-being of our people and our planet at the forefront of all these decisions that are being made. And this is how we can make an impact on the various issues and industries and sectors that impact us in our everyday lives. Healthcare continues to be at the forefront. Healthcare being that issue that impacts every one of our lives. Whether we're Republicans or Democrats or independents, at some point we ourselves or someone who we love or care about, a member of our family, is in need of care. And the fact that we in this great country pay far more for healthcare than any other country with far worse outcomes is unacceptable. The fact that we in this great country are still in a place where those who don't have enough money in their pockets are not able to get the care that they need is unacceptable. How did we get here? We see big insurance companies and big pharma influencing the laws that are being written, the policies that are being made. We see how even as people are unable to get the care they need, their profits are going up because their business model rides on the backs of sick people in this country. This is what needs to change. We can make this change happen by passing legislation like Medicare for All, by setting that baseline that makes sure that every single person in this country is able to get the care that we need. That should be the floor. That should be the expectation that we have in this country. We can make that change happen. We can make it so that no longer will Big Pharma be able to write the policies that say Medicare is not allowed to negotiate to bring our prescription drug prices down, as we have seen. That has been the law of the land. That's got to change. We've got legislation in Congress to do that. We've got legislation in Congress to allow the reimportation of cheaper drugs from countries like Canada. We look at the obstacles that are placed before us. We can pull back the curtain and see why they exist. It is because our voices are not being heard by leaders in Washington who are more interested in their own selfish interests or the interests of the lobbyists who write their campaign PAC contributions. We look at issues like criminal justice reform and the need to enact real criminal justice reform, to get rid of private prisons, to end this failed war on to end the federal marijuana prohibition.
Yeah.
You know, the opioid epidemic that is ravaging our country is gained so much awareness because it is impacting communities everywhere. In my home state of Hawaii, we have a population of about 1.3, 1.4 million people. We have close to 500,000 active opioid prescriptions. And we're not even the worst affected amongst all the states in this country. And so when we talk about ending the federal marijuana prohibition, this is an issue that's directly connected to the opioid crisis that we're facing. And why this is such an urgent action that we need to take, because in states that have legalized either medical marijuana or adult use marijuana, there has been a direct correlation. There's been a direct connection in the reduction of those who are addicted to opioids, as well as opioid-related deaths. When we look at issues like our climate crisis and the impact on our water and on our air and our environment, why is it that those in Washington are not more aggressively putting forward plans and executing those plans to protect our environment, when we have people in places like Flint, Michigan, who are still being poisoned by their water? I was there not too long ago, and Flint's not in the headlines anymore, but there are still families there who cannot bathe in their own homes because their water is poisonous. Yes, they're still drinking water out of bottles or filtered water, but we're talking about taking a shower. A woman came who I met with who showed me, and she talked about the sores that she has on her body and where she has to go to try to bathe and know that she's not going to continue to be poisoned. There are so many things that we need to do. Deal with the high cost of education. Deal with the fact that we still have billions of dollars every year going to fossil fuel companies and tax subsidies, while we are not making the kinds of investments that we need to in renewable energy, in a green economy, in sustainable agriculture. Dealing with the crumbling infrastructure that we have in this country. There is a long laundry list of issues that are impacting every single one of us in our lives in every community across this country. We have to change the paradigm of power that exists to one that puts the well-being of our people and our planet first, and shift the priorities in this country that take the limited resources that we have, the taxpayer dollars that we are giving to our government, and make sure that those dollars are meeting the needs of our people, meeting the needs of our families and our communities. Because right now they're not. Right now they are not. That's why I want to talk about the issue that is central to the rest of these issues, and that is the cost of war. Because we have trillions of dollars, trillions of our taxpayer dollars that are going to pay for regime change wars in other countries. Regime change wars that are incredibly costly on my brothers and sisters in uniform, on our troops, on those who pay the ultimate price, who never make that trip home. Friends of mine who I lost in Iraq. It is incredibly costly on those who do make it home but are dealing with injuries and wounds that are both seen and unseen. Veterans who survive the rigors of combat are able to make that trip home, but then lose that battle here at home and take their own lives. We talk about the cost of war, this is who we are talking about. We talk about the cost of war, we're talking about the countless lives lost and the people in the countries where we wage these wars. The devastation and the destruction that is caused. As we talk about the cost of war, we are also talking about the fact that every single one of us is very quietly paying the price for these wars in all the ways that we just talked about. So as we have politicians in Washington who will tell us that there's just not enough money to make sure that you have clean water to drink, There's just not enough money to make sure that we have clean air to breathe. Not enough money to address this climate crisis we are facing, to make sure that we have a future, a safe future for our kids and for generations to come. Not enough money to invest in infrastructure. Not enough money for education. Not enough money for healthcare. But somehow there is always enough money to continue to wage these regime change wars that are counterproductive to our interests as the American people. They are counterproductive to our national security, making us less safe, strengthening terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Middle East. And they are counterproductive for the people in these countries where we wage these wars. What we're talking about is not just something that happened in the past. This is not only about what happened in Iraq and in Libya and in Syria. We're talking about something that's continuing right now, that's being perpetuated and furthered by people from both parties in countries like Venezuela and Iran. This is happening before our very eyes. This regime change effort in Venezuela, this regime change effort in Iran, the war drums being beaten, yes, by this administration. But if you look at it, and you look at who is advocating for these efforts, it is people from both parties and the foreign policy establishment in Washington. Are they the ones who are going to go and fight these battles?
No.
Are they the ones who are going to go and feel directly firsthand that cost of war? No. It's us. It is us. Dealing with the issues that impact our everyday lives can only be accomplished when we address this central issue of the cost of war. So we talk about regime change wars, these things that we've become most familiar with because of how many years, for many of us it's been the majority of our lives. Our country's been waging these wars. But we also have to deal with this existential threat that is facing us with this new Cold War, with escalating tensions between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China. This nuclear arms race that's been kicked off with President Trump withdrawing from the INF treaty, a treaty negotiated 30 years ago that drastically reduced the numbers of nuclear weapons and missiles in the world. Now we are at a place today where we face a greater risk of nuclear catastrophe than ever before in history. An administration and those in Washington who want to spend more money, who want to spend trillions more dollars to build more nuclear weapons, smaller nuclear weapons, increasing that likelihood that we will end up in a nuclear war, a war where no one will win. No one wins in a nuclear war. All of us, and our world will be destroyed. Now this is something that we in Hawaii experienced about a year ago very directly. It was a huge wake-up call. When we got this message across our cell phones saying, missile incoming, seek shelter immediately, this is not a drill. It came in early on a Saturday morning, and if you can imagine how you would feel and how you would react if you got that message. Thinking about where can your family go? Where is their shelter? If you're faced with having minutes to live, faced with just minutes before your entire world will be destroyed. This is not something theoretical. That alarm turned out to be false in Hawaii, but we reacted in the way that we did with parents lowering their kids down a manhole thinking that may be the only place they could be safe. Or speeding down a road in the wrong direction at 100 miles an hour to try to get to your loved ones. There are so many people in Hawaii with these stories about what they went through, the terrifying feelings that were running through them at that time. Because this threat is real, and it's not just real for people in Hawaii, it's real for every single one of us. We have to understand this and know this so that we can also understand that it does not have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. We have the opportunity now to bring about the kind of change that will bring us back away from this abyss of nuclear disaster, so that we can begin to build that path forward towards a bright future, where we are building relationships with other countries based on cooperation rather than conflict, where we are working towards getting rid of nuclear weapons rather than spending more of our money to build more. This is why I'm running for president, because I don't want any one of you or your loved ones or your families or friends to have to go through what we went through in Hawaii. I'm running for president to bring about an end to regime change wars, to work to end this new Cold War and nuclear arms race, and to take this peace dividend that we will create by taking the trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars and weapons and investing them into serving the needs of our people.
Yeah.
Serving the needs of our people. Sometimes people ask me why I talk about quote-unquote foreign policy so much. Why I talk about the cost of war so much, when there are so many issues that we are dealing with in our everyday lives. It is because unless we address this cost of war, unless we shift the priorities in this country, we will not have what we need to meet those needs that we have. We will not have the resources to invest in the kind of future and today that we need to see. That's the leadership that I'm offering to you, to serve you as your president and commander-in-chief. To every single day put people ahead of profits, to put people ahead of politics, and to bring this country together to fulfill that vision that our founders had for us. To fulfill that vision where we truly have a government of, by, and for the people. To bring those values of service above self to the White House. To restore respect, integrity, and honor into the presidency so that our White House will be that beacon of hope and opportunity and justice and equality for all people. Thank you. I'd love to answer any questions that you have now for a few minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for taking my question.
Thank you.
I work for an AIDS service organization, and I think a lot of people think that the AIDS epidemic is something that's of the past and that it's over. And the number of people with AIDS in Iowa has actually dropped in the last 10 years, but that's only for white people. It's actually for all other non-white populations. It's risen. There are more people in Iowa with AIDS in 2017 than there were in 2007, and that's sad. So the Trump administration has announced that they think we can end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. But I know, working for an AIDS service organization, that we can do so much better than that, because a lot of the things that they're doing right now are really counterproductive to ending the epidemic, like funneling money from the Ryan White AIDS Care Act into family separation and things like that that are really harmful. So I want to know, will you work with AIDS service organizations like Housing Works, the one I work for, to end the epidemic by 2025, and will you meet with people from our organization to work on a plan to make sure that can happen?
Thank you. Thanks. What was your name?
Sarah.
Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for your question and for your work in this important area. The short answer to your question is yes and yes. I would love the opportunity to meet with your organization to hear more about the work that you're doing. There's work that we have already been doing in Congress to make sure that we are continuing to put resources towards those with AIDS and to try to bring about an end to this epidemic. But it is exactly the kind of shifting of priorities and of funds that we have seen from this administration that I've been talking about. That's so important. The kind of shifting of funds, taking it away from healthcare, taking it away from affordable housing, taking it away from education, taking it away from research, and instead putting it towards more wars, an inflated military budget, and really for political purposes, sending money and military and troops to the border, not actually addressing any of the problems that we are seeking to solve in this country. So I appreciate your work and look forward to being able to talk with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
You're one of the few candidates who introduces foreign policy into a discussion when meeting with citizens, and one of the few that seems to express an understanding of the influence of foreign policy on domestic efforts. A real trigger point in foreign policy is the United States continuing relationships with Israel and the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory and having converted Gaza into a concentration camp of sorts. I wonder, in light of our enduring relationship and reported efforts to bring peace to and justice to that area that have continually failed, I wonder how your approach might be different in hopes of bringing justice to Palestinians and peace to the region.
Yeah. You know, I think what needs to happen first and foremost is to speak truthfully and clearly about the situation that's happening there. I think it's unfortunate that the plight of the Palestinian people is not often heard or discussed as we have these foreign policy conversations, or as we talk about the need to pursue a path towards peace. Nor do we often see leaders in Congress or Washington denouncing these illegal settlements as they continue. We don't often hear leaders in Washington denouncing the kinds of rhetoric that we've seen from Netanyahu in just the last few weeks with regards to annexing the West Bank, or the comments made by President Trump about the Golan Heights. This is something that I've already done. I've already been outspoken on these issues, calling them out for what they are and for the devastating and dangerous impacts that they will have on the people in the region, on the Palestinian people, on the Israeli people, on the American people. There are so many different countries who our tensions and the relationship with will be worsened, will continually be worsened by the kinds of actions and rhetoric that we've seen being used, both of late as well as long-standing. So that's, I think, the most important thing, is being able to speak truthfully and to speak out about what's happening there, and to speak out against those actions that take us farther away from those prospects of peace. And that, to me, is the role that we need to play in this country as the United States, to speak out for and to try to see how we can help shape those conditions to make peace a reality. I'm not naive to how complex a challenge that is and how difficult that is, and ultimately that is something that's going to have to take place and be built by the Palestinian and the Israeli people. But the actions of our leaders as of late have been detrimental towards helping to move that process forward. Thank you. Yes.
Just heard you talk about the criminalization of marijuana, but just to know, like, what are your views when we talk about racial disparities, especially in places like Milwaukee, with the 53126 being the worst place to raise a young black man? And also, I heard you talk about education, but the views for public education, and when we talk about the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. It is a lot. There's no question when you look at the data and the statistics that not only when we're talking about marijuana, but when we talk about the entire failed war on drugs, how disproportionately it has impacted people of color. How many people's lives have been ruined because of this failed war on drugs. This is at the heart of the kind of criminal justice reform that we need to see. Just a couple of weeks ago when we reintroduced legislation to end the federal marijuana prohibition, a bill that is the only bipartisan bill in Congress to do so. My Republican colleague from Alaska, Don Young, was my partner in doing that. At the press conference that we held, we had different people who were there to speak on this. We had a veteran who was there to talk about how this prohibition is continuing to impact veterans who are dealing with chronic pain from combat-related injuries and post-traumatic stress, and who were told from the VA, sorry, we're not allowed to even refer you to a cannabis dispensary, so the only option you have left available to you is opioids. We had small business owners who were there, we had doctors who were there, all speaking to why this action needs to be taken to end the prohibition. But we also had a young man named Harry from Virginia, African-American guy, who was in college several years ago studying computer science, setting himself up for success in his own life. Long story short, he was arrested for cannabis possession. He was given 2 mandatory minimum 5-year sentences. Pulled out of college, thrown into prison for 10 years. No ifs, ands, or buts, no appeals, no nothing. 2 mandatory back-to-back sentences of 5 years each. And he talked about how his cellmate was someone who shot somebody in the chest and killed them. And he got out of prison before Harry did. So Harry, you know, he's not an activist. He's not a... He literally was there because someone called him and said, hey, we need to hear your story. Because his story is a reflection of so many other people's stories in this country that are not being heard. And it is because of this criminal justice system that is so broken that is impacting people like him all across the country. Education and our need to invest in education plays a huge role in being able to provide those tools and that environment early on to break this cycle that we have seen impacting people in this country. That's why the cuts that Sarah was talking about, the cuts that we are seeing across the board in everything except the defense budget, will not only impact us today, but will have huge ramifications for generations to come. So this is something that we need to address on all fronts to break this cycle, to make sure that we are empowering everyone and make sure that these systems are working for us. Thank you.
Okay, well, my question, is about your support for Medicare for All. So I'm a small business owner. I pay an enormous amount out of, as an individual on individual policy. My friends are also entrepreneurs working in startups. But then we hear from folks who don't want to lose their private insurance. There's a lot of fear tactics around Medicare for All. So how are those going to be addressed, and how can we ensure that, now that there's no penalty for not buying health insurance, how can we ensure that my friends can get affordable, can access affordable health insurance?
The fear tactics that you're talking about, I think, are important to address and to recognize that those who are opposed to Medicare for All, yes, they are putting fear tactics out there that are stoking, I think, a fear that is founded, where people are afraid of the unknown, afraid of uncertainty, where you live your whole life with this one system, and then all of a sudden, we're going to turn it upside down. So that's where so much of the work that we have to do comes in providing people with information and education to let them know that really what we're talking about is you're going to be able to continue to see your own doctor. You're going to be able to continue to get the same kind of care that you're getting. You're just going to be able to pay less for it. Because when we look at how much money goes towards the administrative costs of these insurance companies, we look to our ability to be able to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. We're actually talking about bringing down the overall cost of healthcare. And so what that difference will mean is right now we're paying out of pocket, whether it's individuals or a small business owner, paying out of pocket to these insurance companies. A huge amount of money in many cases. The difference is we're going to be paying a little bit less to a different place, but we're still going to be able to get that care. Another thing I think that's important to recognize is Medicare as we know it today would not be the same Medicare that we would like to see passed in Medicare for All. It'll be expanded to include a lot of those services that are not covered right now. If you look at every other country in the world that has some form of universal health care or single payer. Every one of them has some form of a private insurance component for those who want it. And I think that's the direction that we need to go in this country. Make sure we have that baseline level of quality care for every single person in this country. And if there are other areas or another space for those who choose to go out and purchase their own private insurance, then that's fine. But I think this will help bring down so much of the burden that is disproportionately carried by small business owners like yourselves. And that will actually help. It'll help entrepreneurs and innovators and creators who simply can't afford the current burden of this high cost of health insurance. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Let me just close on one note. I want to say thanks because there's a lot of you who I've seen at a number of our events here who have been so helpful in getting the word out, making sure that we get on the debate stage. We passed that 65,000 mark. Thank you to you. We are assured a place in the debates in June and July, the 2 dates that have been announced. I want to let you know that we can't be complacent. Our campaign must and will continue to grow. We have to continue to build the momentum because we are told after those 2 debates they're going to change the marker to qualify for the next debate. So that's fine. It's more motivation for us to continue to do the great work that all of us are doing. I just want to express how much I appreciate you. If you have friends or if you have other folks who want more information, please go to tulsi2020.com and we look forward to having more of these kinds of gatherings many more times. Thank you.
So we have about 10 minutes till we have to go to the next stop. If you guys want to take some photos, line up, just give me